All right, we'll get started. Here's for anyone who might not be here today, we got the Zoom going. I'm going to share something real fast to get us started. This is kind of like our signing this in blood. I want everybody to say, yes, I did see that you posted the new dates for turning in the assignments, because I did not update them on the syllabus, and I don't want anyone coming back later and saying, well, the syllabus said had this date, because they're going to be wrong now. These are the new dates. You got an email with them in it, and they're in the announcements for the class. So you can always scroll on the announcements until you find them. They're there. And then it even I put the date. It's Tuesday, the 7th at 4 is the time for our presentations. That's when we'll go over all of the work that you're putting together in the announcement below it right there. Okay. Everybody good on that? Y'all, if you look at the dates on the turn in parts, you got basically, 2 weeks or so between everything, close to it, 10, 12, 14 days minimum to do the parts, and you can get as far ahead as you want along the way. Let me also show you under the content here I moved them all up to the top. Now, if you go to Blackboard and you click on content, this is where you turn in your stuff. Okay. It's right there under content. I tried to make a folder to put them. So I'll delete that since it's wrong. It's just under content. And they're in order, I believe, from top to bottom as you turn them in. So I'll share again. All right. I think before, when I tried to do videos for on Zoom for chapters that we were going over, there were problems when I would put these on full screen. Sometimes it wouldn't scroll through, and it would just sit on like one the whole time while I was talking and wouldn't go. So I will just leave it on this page like this. So if you ever have to watch one of these, it's going to be this page. That way, at least what I'm talking about should be on the screen, hopefully. So today we're talking about managing and leading, chapter 3. Y'all have all been in several of my classes now at this point, and I'll tell you, there's always one chapter to me that it has necessary information in it that we will test on, that's important to go over, but it kind of sucks. And that chapter is chapter 3 for this class to me. So let's just get through it today as best we can. You need to read this chapter just like all the rest of them, but this is one that you actually will get more out of reading, because it goes in the slides aren't quite as clear for this one as you go through as some of the others. But this one is about managing and leading, which sounds good because that's an important thing for us. But it goes into some different things like theories and such. When you start getting into theories, what is a theory? What would you say? Another definition for a theory? It's basically, it can be. It's what somebody's idea is. It's a broad construct idea of this is what I think is going to happen. My theory is this, and that's usually followed by what you expect to happen. So there's 4 different eras, and we'll talk about them kind of as we go through. The classic era, the behavioral era, the human relations era, and the modern era. And you can kind of see by looking that what each one of these things are going to be by looking at it. Oh yeah, I can't just click on this one. Okay, so the classic era, 1880s to the 1930s, and it was prompted by the Industrial Revolution. So we know that that changed the way a lot of things were done. You know, the Industrial Revolution gave us machines and things to provide work that people didn't have to do quite as much hands-on work in a lot of ways. It was subdivided into two different approaches here: scientific management and general administrative practices. And there are some key contributors. Now, all right, here's some intel for you. You'll be tested on this chapter. You will have your book to use for your test for this chapter. You will have these slides to use for your test for this chapter. Your test will be either a take home, where I give you the paper and you go take it at home and bring it back, or it will be on Blackboard it'll be open from this day to this day. And you know, I'm not just going to open it for like 3 hours one day. I'm going to open it for like a couple of days where you can take the test. Okay. So don't fret as you're going through this stuff and you're like, okay, 1880s to 1930s is the classic era. I got to remember those dates. The contributors during this time are Taylor, Fayol, and Weber. Don't worry about, like, get the gist of the different trends and the different thought processes during each time frame. Not so much about trying to kill yourself remembering the names and stuff, because you can come back and find them. So Taylor, which was the first one there, he had 4 principles of scientific management. Base your work methods on scientific study of tasks. Scientific study of tasks to me is kind of like breaking things down into components, which is something that we like to do, you know, with recreation therapy activities. You have to break them into smaller tasks to figure out what we need to adapt and things sometimes, so it makes sense. You scientifically select, train, and develop each worker. Cooperate with workers to be sure that the scientifically developed methods are followed. Divide work responsibility almost equally between managers and workers performing the task. That's kind of important for this one, is to know that your managers and workers are both still pretty much front line in this scenario for sure. And you're using science as a basis for selecting, training, developing your workers, things such as that. Fayol, Unre, Fayol, 5 functions of managers. Need to know what these are. The 5 functions, as he saw it, were in planning, organizing, commanding, coordinating, and controlling. Okay, let's talk about these just a little bit. Planning, we all know what that's about. You know, as a manager, you have to be able to plan. You plan the schedule, you plan who's going to be there, you plan what you're going to do that day, whatever. Organizing, what kind of things might we have to organize as a manager? Workload. Yep, workload for specific individuals, for everyone actually, but you know, by each person, what their workload is going to be. What else might you have to organize?
Goals and objectives.
Yep. What are the goals and objectives of our specific area that we're working in that day with the clients that we have at this time? Okay. Commanding. What would commanding be? That's a strong word, isn't it? I want to see what it says in here for the actual word commanding, because that's pretty strong. Okay. What do you think of as a manager as commanding meaning? I'm not going to spend the time going through this whole book looking for that. Tell me what your thoughts are, and then I'll tell you mine.
Distributing tasks to your other leaders and making sure they execute those tasks?
Yeah, it's, I like that. You said distributing tasks. That's you're saying, that's actually being able to say, hey, I need you to do this. I need you to take care of this. I need you to take care of this. Although you may be involved in helping at this part, and hey, I need you to help me do this. You're still commanding, you're still, I think of war, your commanders, they have to be given directions to the soldiers of what they're going to be doing. So think of yourself as a manager. I'm not telling you to blow it up and make yourself feel all pompous, but like, in a way, you're kind of like the commander of the ship, and you need to be given orders and putting people going the right directions and doing those things. It doesn't mean that you're saying, hey, you do this. Commanding has that kind of connotation to it where you're going to be almost rude or mean. It doesn't have to be that way. Coordinating is, how do we work best together? What's the best mix of strategies we can use? What's the best mix of staff that we can have in each specific case? And then controlling is another where we have to solve problems, develop incentives. Controlling is making sure that what we expect to be done is actually happening. We have to find a way that we're going to measure, it's basically saying, hey guys, we're going to, at the end of every 6 months, I'm going to do staff. Gosh, I have it all every 6 months or so here where I sit down with my boss and he tells me how I'm doing and all that stuff. I can't think of the word right this second. Yeah, there you go. Like staff evaluations. You have to tell them up front. Controlling is setting up by saying, hey, we're going to evaluate how well you're doing in this way. That's how you control. That's the most common way that we look into that. There's a good, page 24 is where 3.1 talks a lot about management versus leadership on these things that we just talked about. All right. He also talked about 14 principles of management. The same Fayol guy. Division of labor. That we have to do that. That's handing out tasks accordingly. And as a manager, if you're a good manager, you need to do it fairly. Okay. I've told y'all before that I'm going to tell you things that I've seen in the workforce, not just things that are in the book. I have worked for sometimes. Some of the best things that you learn about being a manager is for working for a manager who is not very good at their job. And I don't mean, you think to yourself, if I'm ever in this position, I'm not going to do this. It stinks to learn that way, but I've seen it and I've been there. An example of that, I was a pretty hard worker when I was at the NMRC, and I would be put in charge of, like, say we had a fall festival or something like that. My boss would say, hey, Chris, I want you to head this up, get it together. We're going to do this. And she would just give me very limited, but tell me that I was in charge of it. So it would go well. And the next time we had a big event, who you think got it?
Yeah.
Me, because she didn't have to hardly tell me anything. It went off smoothly. But however, is that fair that I get every one of them to be doing the majority of the work on because I did a good job? That's not good division of labor. And I've seen that in person. And as a manager, I will tell you, that's something that's going to be hard to stay away from, because when you're working with someone and you see that they're doing a good job and you trust that they're going to do a good job, it's going to be so easy to just want to hand it to that person. However, what are you doing to your other workers if you're doing that? You're stunting them. You are stifling them. You are holding them down. by not giving them the opportunity to grow by having that same opportunity. Sometimes you grow by failure, which is, and you can make it a positive. Like say you put somebody else in charge of the next event and you had a few, you're gonna get through it. It's gonna be fine, but you have a few hiccups along the way. You sit down with that person at the end and say, all right, what do you think we could have done different? I think this was great and this was great. What did you think? And you can have like a powwow with that person, and they can get so much more out of actually getting their feet dirty and getting in on an activity than just taking orders from somebody. So let your people do that. Authority. You have to have a certain degree of authority as a manager where, it's like I talked about in my last class that I just taught. If you're too buddy with your coworkers, then you lose that authority. Now, do you need to be totally standoffish and door closed? And, no, you need to be approachable and you need to be, but it's somehow, and that I told you this is tricky when you go from in the group of just say recreation therapists and you move up to the manager, you've been in the same position and now you're above all these people. It's a hard step a lot of times to gain that authority figure status because you've been equals for so long. And it might take you going to the manager above you if people aren't listening to you. And once that happens once or twice and they see some discipline, then that'll stop. And some of them may not like you quite as much, and that just comes with the territory. That's just, sorry, that's being a grown-up. Discipline as a principle of management, does that mean that doesn't mean fire everybody that doesn't do everything you say? That just means that you need to have the ability to have some sort of sanctions on people if they don't do what's expected of them in the workplace. Whether it's cutting their hours, whether, whatever the case may be, you need to have some degree of discipline. Unity of command. Now, if you're the first line manager and you're going to be out one day, what happens then? That's kind of what we're talking about with unity of command. You need to know like contingency plans for if so-and-so is out, this is who's going to be in charge. This is what we're going to do. This is how we make decisions, things like that. Unity of direction. It's basically you want everybody pulling the same way on the rope. You don't want somebody pulling the opposite way or on the other end of it, pushing the end. Pushing the rope doesn't work too well. Some people will do that. Subordination of individual interests. You want to allow for your people to feel like they can talk to you and give you their thoughts, their individual ideas and things like that. So make sure that that is there. Remuneration. That is a word that honestly I forgot. I looked at it and I don't even remember what that one is. Somebody Google that word. I want to hear what it says in there because I actually don't remember.
Money paid for work or service.
Okay, that has to do, you need to be able to handle the finances. There's a payment for work. That's what that word is. Y'all are about to see my tongue just go in a knot. For some reason, I'm having trouble with that. Centralization. You need to have a central like authority branch in every management situation. A scalar chain, it's kind of like a chain of command or a, where you see the hierarchy table of the CEO down to the janitor. I'm not making the janitor I'm just saying, there's a totem pole everywhere. Order, you need to be able to maintain and keep order in your facility, in your group. Which means as a manager, you need to be able to be good at things like conflict resolution. Because let me tell you, your employees are gonna have some conflicts. And you need to be able to de-escalate to a degree. Sometimes it may be sending somebody home, may be the way to de-escalate it. You know, something like that. Equity. You need to have equity if you are in a management role. That's like what we talked about before. You're handing out things fairly to each other. The pay scale is fair. I mean, there was time in this country where, you know, pay for the same job, everybody didn't get the same pay. It's a lot better now as far as fairness and all. Stability of tenure of personnel. You want your people to feel like if they do a good job, they are in a good position to keep their position or move up even. You know, they need to feel like they're not constantly at a threat of losing their job. Initiative. You need to give them initiative, you know, benefits to doing a good job. Your benefits shouldn't be getting the next big task because you did a good job. I keep going back to that because it's easy to do that. And then esprit de corps. I'm not even going to go over that one, and it's not on the test. I told you this is not my favorite chapter, y'all, but we're gonna go through it because we're gonna test on it, and there's some things that are good in here. 6 characteristics of bureaucracies. What's a bureaucracy? Somebody gonna Google it too?
System of government in which most of the important decisions are made by state officials rather than by elected representatives.
Okay, so it is people at the top making decisions. That's basically what we're getting at when it's talking about bureaucracy. Max Weber is the person. Now on your test, it's gonna be some questions like Max Weber said, da, da, da. So it should be easy for you to come back and find this stuff. Decisions are gonna be made from the top regarding division of labor, regarding the authority hierarchy, which is like who's in charge next, who's in charge next. You know, like there's a level of hierarchy as far as who has authority. And you need that because, I mean, think about it, even our government. You know, if the president is assassinated, who becomes who becomes president then? Okay, if the vice president dies, then what happens? We're fixing to test y'all civics knowledge now. Yeah. Speaker of the House is next. And from there, I don't know. At that point, we might as well just call it quits and join up with another country. So we might want to do that anyway. I don't know. Formal selection is something else that is done. You know, you don't give a lot of choice as in this bureaucracy. The people at the top, you're choosing employees. You're choosing what they're going to be doing. They hand out formal rules and regulations. It is not very personable. It's not very friendly from the managerial side of things. It's impersonality where you're not that approachable. You're not that. It's across the board rules for everybody. You're not making exceptions and things like that. And career orientation. You are allowing and setting forth ways for people to set the pathway of their career and keep it on a trajectory that they can go. But you provide in a bureaucratic way from the top what they need to move forward in their career. They're not going out and doing this themselves. So then we get to the behavioral era. Occurred during the 30s and 40s. It was influenced by the Depression and what happened during this time, there was the introduction of labor relations legislation. And it focused on why people do things. And we'll talk about these people, Mayo, Follett, and Barnard, in a second. So Mayo's Hawthorne studies, they did a study at the Western Electric Hawthorne plant. And what they were doing were they were studying the impact of illumination or light, how bright it is, on productivity. And the results that they got, regardless of what the researchers did to the work area illumination, worker productivity increased. So change in general was showing. So they concluded acknowledgement increased productivity far better than financial incentives. People worked harder if they felt that managers care about them. Remember that. If you don't take anything else from this slide, remember that people work harder if they feel that you care about them. Work norms drove productivity by establishing a fair day's work. That's something that was big during this time frame. They were trying to get a fair day's work. They needed a fair wage and a fair day's work. That's like some old antiquated words that they would say back then. That was a big deal. The informal organization affected productivity and made boring work more tolerable. So by making things more informal, productivity actually went up in the workforce. It's kind of like by relaxing a few rules, they saw people be more effective because they were probably having a better time in the workforce. Mary Parker Follett, the management prophet. I almost skipped her, didn't I? She said that an organization is a group of people, not just a means of production. And that's true. And you need to remember that as a manager, is that your organization is not just what you're wanting to put out, that there's individual people that you're working with that need to know that you care about them. And they're, it's just like if someone has a family emergency, they need to know that you're not going to punish them in the workplace for a family emergency. And there's some jobs where that happens, banks, for example, you get points for days missed, and they don't give a damn why you miss. If you aren't there, you get 2 points. And if you get 8 points or something like that over a 2-year period, you're just fired. There's no, you think those employees really feel like the top cares about them when they have a family emergency and have to miss? I'm sure some of that stuff has had to be tweaked in the last couple of years with COVID. They had to relax those restrictions to allow for quarantine and sickness and things like that in the families. So another thing that she said is managers should lead workers rather than rely on the authority of their positions. 100% agree. I think of a good manager as, part of the team, yet at the same time, you're kind of like a good coach who can give a rah-rah speech and get everybody going the same direction. However, she's also saying you're not just a coach. You're not just standing back saying, all right, y'all go do it. You're a coach is part of a team. So a good coach is a good motivator. You need to lead rather than just rely on authority. That's common sense to me. It makes a lot of sense that it would be here. Workers need to be given greater responsibility, and managers need to be trained in management. Hey, I like this Mary Parker Follett chick. She's pretty smart. She's saying some good stuff, to me on here. Need to be given greater responsibility because it helps them to grow. You know, I just said, if everybody isn't given a chance to carry projects and things like that, then the ones who aren't getting those opportunities are getting stunted in their growth as far as in the workplace. So it covers that. And managers should be trained in management. Sometimes people are put into positions of authority when, I'm not gonna say they're not ready, but they may not have the full complement of tools to be able to be successful. So just because you go into management, that doesn't mean that they just leave you alone and say, do it. You need to be trained, because there's somebody above you who has expectations of what they want you to manage, how they want you to manage, and you have to answer to them even as a manager, because there's a higher manager than you unless you own the company. So that being the case, you need to be trained in what's expected of you. And things like what are proper techniques in management, you know, getting CEUs, getting opportunities to learn and get better at your craft. Follett's views were virtually ignored at the time, yet today they're the basis of contemporary management thinking. So no wonder I like that so much, because they make a lot of sense in today's world, even though she's from way back. Chester Barnard, 3 functions of managers. Back to the coaching thing, like I said. Number 1, motivate personnel. You know, I think of coaches as a good coach is a good motivator. You need to maintain effective communication with personnel, absolutely. And you need to hire and retain quality personnel. These 3 all make a lot of sense too. An organization is a behavioral system made up of individuals with interacting social networks. And you need to realize that it's like we talked about a little bit about how, you know, Tom and Jerry don't work good together because they play too much or whatever. You're going to have cliques. You're going to have people who click and people who don't, you know, folks that don't get along, people with different beliefs, people with different tastes. And as a manager, you need to realize that it is a behavioral system, your group that works for you and with you. It's just like this whole ecosystem of people who are all different, and they're going to interact, and therefore you're going to have like issues where they're not going to get along, perhaps. Things like that. You need to be able to put out fires. Human relations era came from the 50s to the 80s, influenced by growing workplace diversity. How is the workplace getting more diverse? 50s to 80s. It was getting more diverse in a couple ways that come to mind. Yep.
Desegregation.
Yep. There you go. Ding, ding. If I had candy, I'd throw it at y'all. But I don't. Maybe next time. I've done that at conferences before. It helps keep people awake too. Influenced by the growing workplace diversity, the civil rights movement, soaring stock markets, and the growth of computing. So things are becoming more, more artificial intelligence based, where everything is not by hand. You're starting to find, factories that have equipment that are doing things for us. Some key contributors, Maslow and McGregor. Maslow is, y'all ever heard of Maslow before? If you've taken psychology classes, probably so. He's a psychology guy. And this is his hierarchy of needs. And I'm not gonna go real super deep into this. You won't have to draw this out on a test or anything, but it is kind of important in that we know what it's all about. There's the needs. You see the biggest portion at the bottom. I don't know if y'all can even read that where you are, but the biggest portion at the bottom is physiological, and that's things like food, water, shelter, and warmth. The things we need to stay alive. One up from there, you have safety, where people need security, stability, freedom from fear. You don't need to be living in a total state of fear all the time. The next one up, as far as needs, we need to feel belonging and love from friends, family, spouse, lover. Up one, self-esteem, achievement, mastery, recognition, and respect. Now, certain people need that more than others. Some people are just even by sports. I think about coaches. Some people are motivated by that coach that gets up in their face and points, and if you do that again, you're getting on the bench, whatever. They get motivated by that. Some people get motivated by, boy, that was a good block you threw on that last play. You know what you see the difference there? Some people need you to get in their grill and get mad with them, and that's motivating. To me, that is not motivating. That makes me want to just sit like next time, just let them go by. Yeah, I can't, that kind of coaching didn't work for me. But some people, that's what they want. That's what they like. That it gets them fired up. They didn't, but same thing with recognition and respect. Some people need that more than others. And you learn that as a manager, kind of who needs the pats on the back more. Now, that being said, that doesn't mean that you should treat those people necessarily different. What that means is you should learn that positive reinforcement or those pats on the back achievements for good achievements that they've done, giving them recognition. I used to be over the city pool, and I saw that they added something this year, and they did just like lifeguards of the week at the Oxford City Pool this year. And they had, I don't know how many guards they had. I never did that, but when I saw it, I was like, that was a good idea. They get a little recognition. They get put on Facebook with OPC. They're holding their little, thing. They're getting just a little pat on the back, a little, hey, good job. Now, I'm pretty sure that every lifeguard that they had got it at some point during the year, and they just took turns. I didn't see any repeat guards of the week or anything. I think it was just kind of, they went through. But that's a good example of how they kind of got to everybody and patted everybody on the back by some recognition. They all had their chance. At the top here is self-actualization, which is actually like learning about yourself. You pursue inner talent. That's where you deal with things like creativity and finding fulfillment for yourself. This is Maslow. This is not so much workplace specific right here. This is a psychology triangle you're looking at right here. But that's kind of where he was one of the contributors in this management theory we talked about on the previous slide. Okay, McGregor. He was the other one who was in on that management era during management theory during the human relations era. Theory X and theory Y. In theory X, when there's a negative view of people, you think that people dislike work, they avoid responsibility, they need to be closely supervised, and they need to be controlled to get them to perform. Get in line, do your job. In theory Y, where you take a positive view of people just in general, this is, your workers, you're giving them benefit of the doubt. You're taking a positive view. You think that, hey, not everybody dislikes work. Work can be enjoyed. People accept and seek responsibility. People can be self-directed and don't need to be so closely supervised. People want rewards that satisfy self-actualization, which was on the last slide. They want to do well so they'll feel good about themselves. That's theory Y, is you're saying that you're giving that positive vibe that they're going to do things because they want to feel good about themselves. You don't have to control them. You don't have to closely supervise. That's just two different theories, and they're very different, obviously. Systems theory. This was adapted from biological theory. It views an organization as a series of interrelated parts that are dependent on each other to get things done. And it is, and it's true, and it's not just rec therapy. It's how we have interdisciplinary team meetings, and we work with the other groups to help, for the betterment of our clients. However, that being said, your department and the people who work under you as a manager, they need to be that set of interrelated parts. They're dependent on each other to get things done. Because if they're bickering, if they're not showing up when they're supposed to be there, are things going to be getting done like they should be? Absolutely not. You need the parts to be, like I said, you need to be pulling the same direction. This is just a picture depicting that systems theory. Again, not going to make you draw it or anything. Don't worry much about that. Components of leadership. Some things to remember. Leadership is a process, two-way between the leader and the group. And that's important because if you make it one way, you're being very, what was it? Bureaucratic? Is that what the word where? Yeah, where you are just telling people what to do. You got to make sure that it's two-way and that people know that. Now, do you have to leave it open to the point where every time you give a directive, that's a strong word, but it's better than command. Every time you ask someone to do something, should they be able to just say why? You don't have to leave it open to that degree, but they need to know that they can come to you and communicate with you. And if they feel that something isn't fair, that they can say, hey, I don't think this is fair, and not expect you to punish them for talking to you. So it needs to be an open communication type situation. Leadership also involves influence, and the leader is a big influence on the group. Think about leading a recreation therapy activity. This is not necessarily from the manager role. This is from the practitioner role. If you come in and you are happy and upbeat and ready to go, are your people going to be more enthusiastic about your activity than if you act like you're just mopey and walk in there like you don't want to be there? Obviously, same thing is from a manager. If you're, I've worked in places where you could tell that the boss is having a bad day. What do you do that day? You hide from the boss. Sorry, that's just the way it works. You influence your group because they see from the top down what kind of day it's going to be. If you're in a bad mood, it can be bad for everybody. So leadership occurs within a group with a common purpose. So even in your little cliques that are working under you as a manager, there's going to be subgroups, these cliques, these friends, these different people. And somebody in that group is going to have to be the one that says, all right, we've sat here long enough. Let's go get this done. There's leaders below the leader, the top leader, if you see what I'm saying there. Leadership involves meeting a goal to accomplish some sort of task. If you didn't have a goal, if you didn't have a task, what are you leading to? Why do you need to lead? There's nothing to lead to if you don't have a task or a goal. So that's got to be a part of it. Types of power. There's reward power, coercive power, legitimate power, referent power, expert power, information power, and connection power. Now, these coercive power, what does that sound like to anybody? Like if you coerce someone? Yeah, kind of like it's like a sneaky kind of thing. Like it's coercion is not a positive word. I want y'all to go in the book and actually read each one of these. It explains it a lot better than I can. I don't give you specific areas. I just say read the book, and I stand by that. But this is one area of the book that I think it would be a good choice to go and actually read about each one of these types of power, because some of them will be tested on. We're almost done, y'all. Planning statements. You have a vision, a mission. What was that? I couldn't quite hear you. Okay. All right. Planning statements. You got a vision, a mission, goals, and objectives. Vision is which is the biggest on here? Obviously. Vision, that's my vision is this. It even sounds big, like this is what I want to see, the big picture. That's the description of a desired state for the organization. This is what we want to be as an organization, our whole place, not just, like that would be, say you were working in recreation therapy at a hospital. Your hospital would have like the vision statement. You know what I mean? Mission, it's going to identify the organization's basic business and purpose. This is what we do. This is our number one purpose for being here. This is our mission. Exactly like it says. Goals, statements of near-term desired outcomes for the organization. Now, these are different from goals and objectives that we give to recreation therapy clients, but same thing. The goals are near-term desired outcome for the organization, and objectives are the actions or strategies, which are steps, just like when we're working with our patients, that have to be taken to get to the goals. So objectives are small things that we know are reachable, that are doable for our employees to do to meet the goals. So objectives are things that we're going to do to help us get to there. And when we're doing objectives, one good way to make objectives, I know that you guys have seen this before, SMART objectives. If not, this is a really good slide, and we need to know what these are, because this is actually something that's useful. Your objectives need to be specific. They need to be measurable. You need to have some kind of way that you can measure whether or not your objective is happening or not. They need to be achievable. If you make it too hard, it's going to break spirit. If you make it too easy, it's going to be, people are going to feel like you don't think they can do much. It needs to be realistic, which goes along the same line, and time related. It needs to have like a deadline, or this is when it's going to happen. There's a time component tied in with objectives. Y'all, that was as quick as I could get through chapter 3 and all those Maslow's and people and all that. It's read the chapter, but really read the part that I just told you about the types of power. That's one particular section. The rest of it, when you're tested on it, you can come back and find the parts that you need to find. You don't need to remember who had each one of those things, okay? I'm going to stop sharing there, and we will stop for today. I'm trying to get through as much of this bulk kind of quick. I want to get one test under our belt, and then we'll actually have some days where we're going to work on you can work on your project here, where y'all can bounce ideas off of each other. You can use the time in here to actually work on it, and you won't have to find the time at home. Okay, I think that will be good, but I do want to get one test under our belt before we really start giving that time. Okay, y'all have a great rest of your day. I'll see you guys on Thursday.